Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our council meeting this afternoon. We're going to begin with our land acknowledgement, and I'm going to ask Deputy Mayor Keaveney to read it for us.
Thank you, Your Worship, and good afternoon, everyone. We would like to begin by acknowledging that we are meeting on the traditional lands and treaty territory of the Saugeen Ojibwe Nation, which includes the Chippewas of Nawash Unceded First Nation and the Chippewas of Saugeen First Nation. We also recognize the Métis, whose ancestors shared this land and these waters. We extend our gratitude to all Anishinaabe and Métis peoples and their descendants, past, present, and future, who continue to care for and inhabit these lands and tend these waters.
And I'll just ask you to join with me in a moment of silent reflection on today's business. Thank you. Is there any disclosure of pecuniary interest? Around the horseshoe, I see none, but I remind you that at any time that a disclosure of pecuniary interest is necessary, that you will do so. So we'll move on to announcements, and I'll turn the microphone over to CAO Rob Armstrong.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Two quick announcements today. First, I'd like to introduce our asset management summer student, Owen Farnsworth, who is here today joining us over here. I understand next week we'll have, or in 2 weeks' time, we'll have a number of full-time staff that we'll be introducing as well. In addition, I wanted just to give council a heads up with the warm season upon us. On Wednesday morning, the Jersey barriers will be installed for the introduction of our summer seasonal patios for restaurants. This year, we have 2 additional patios for restaurants. We have Geo and Franz again, Christine Sheardown, the kitchen, the Leaky Canoe, and the Red Door. They're proposing a patio out front as well. So look forward to those being installed this week.
Great, thank you very much. Other announcements? Councillor Greenfield.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, on Saturday, May 27th, that's coming up pretty soon, from 7 a.m. until noon, there will be a garage and bake sale held at the Meaford Curling Club. Baked goods and a variety of garage sale items, proceeds to the Meaford Curling Club. And at that approximately the same time and very close to the same location, the Meaford Ag Society will be holding a plant sale that starts in the parking lot at 8 o'clock. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Deputy Mayor Keaveney.
Thank you, Your Worship. On behalf of the Rotary Club of Meaford, I wanted to announce that the club is now accepting nominations for the Citizen of the Year award, very prestigious award in this community. The deadline for nominations is June 9th. They can be dropped off at the Chamber of Commerce office or delivered in an envelope to myself. And the presentation will take place at Canada Day at the Pavilion, and I'll let you know the time later on. Thanks so much.
Any other announcements? Seeing none, we'll move on to public participation. Members of the public are encouraged to provide council with their comments and questions. Presentations must be prearranged with legislative services before the agenda is released and will be limited to 10 minutes. If a member of the public wishes to make a deputation on items on the council agenda or to ask a public question, they may do so either in person at the council chambers or remotely via Zoom, phone, or internet. Members of the public wishing to make a deputation or ask a public question must register in advance by 10 in the morning on the day of. And you can contact the deputy clerk at meaford.ca. The phone number is 519-538-1060, extension 1100. An email with access information will be sent to those who register for remote participation. Deputations are limited to 5 minutes and public questions are limited to 2 minutes. And the public can watch this meeting live via the Municipality of Meaford's YouTube channel. It's www.meaford.ca/YouTube. So we did have three presentations for this afternoon, but two of the people involved have been called away on business. And so I'm going to call Nora Beatty to the podium. We've got her microphone turned on. Nora represents the Grey Bruce County Health Coalition and the petition against the privatization of hospitals. Nora?
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mayor Kentner, Deputy Mayor Keaveney, councillors and members of the public. I'm here today because my grandfather leafleted on the prairies with Tommy Douglas's campaign for public health care. I'm also here because my father was a railroad engineer and in his later career was the Canadian chairman of the United Transportation Union. About 25 years ago, he said to me, if you kids don't stand up and fight like me and your grandfather's generation, you're going to lose everything that we fought for and you have enjoyed. Well, I'm not a kid anymore. I actually wasn't then either. But as I have watched our current government bring about destructive changes in so many areas, his plans to privatize our public health care, and in particular, the threat those changes pose to our small rural hospitals, has compelled me to fight back. So I started the Grey Bruce County Health Coalition, affiliated with the Ontario Health Coalition, and their province-wide campaign to stop the Ford government from removing 50% of surgeries and diagnostics from public hospitals. The government is funding community clinics, but that is their euphemism for private hospital. The OHC has fought to maintain public health care for over 40 years. It's a grassroots, nonpartisan organization which has held successful campaigns against privatization moves by all political parties. This time, it is the current conservative plans that are so abhorrent and go further than any other government. Indeed, provinces such as Quebec and BC are currently pulling back on their experiments with privatization. Many international and Canadian studies and a recently failed legal challenge by Cambie Surgeries Corporation to the BC Supreme Court have proven the negative results of privatization. Costs to the government increase, staff shortages in public hospitals increase, poorer patient outcomes and longer wait lists increase, and contraventions of the 1985 Canada Health Act, such as overbilling, double billing, and upselling occur. The Canada Health Act states that healthcare is to be provided based on need, no matter where you live and no matter how rich or poor you are, and no patient can be charged for medically needed hospital and physician care. This act is like a Canadian patient's Bill of Rights. Very quickly, I joined with my co-chair, Brenda Scott. Brenda had already been organizing and leading the Chesley area in protesting their hospital's frequent ER closures. After a 2-month closure last fall, since December, their ER has banker's hours, Monday to Friday, 9 to 5. There have been many ER closures across the province due to staff shortages and underfunding. The most recent permanent closure is Minden Hospital ER. That small community was given only 6 weeks notice of the closure on June 1st this year, and no consultation with any local stakeholders took place, including the town council. Will that be Meaford Hospital's fate? Brenda held a town hall in early April at which our MPP Rick Byers spoke and pledged to support his constituents. The community circulated a petition which to date, Mr. Byers, despite repeated requests, has not responded to nor presented to the legislature. Last week, he voted in favor of Bill 60. His allegiance is clearly to the Conservative caucus. We are conducting the OHC's opinion poll on May 26 and 27. We have to insist that democracy matters and want to give regular Ontarians of every walk of life, in every community, an opportunity to have a say. Last Saturday, I conducted the first poll in Grey County. It was inspiring to see 49 seniors at Central Place Retirement Community in Owen Sound vote with their hearts and guided by their lived experience. The ballot question is straightforward. Do you want our public hospital services to be privatized to for-profit hospitals and clinics? Yes or no? There is an option to vote online now. Campaign goal is to garner 1 million no votes so that enough political pressure can be put on the Ford government to force them to change direction. We expected Bill 60, euphemistically called Your Health Act, to pass. However, that is not the end of our campaign. We are just beginning. The public's outrage is growing. After all, the majority in our provincial legislature was achieved with only 18% of the eligible voting public. Ford has chosen to see his majority as a mandate to bring in changes which he never presented to the public. In fact, in the 2 months leading up to the election, ministry representatives followed OHC staff around the province. OHC were warning towns about government plans to privatize, while ministry reps told local press that they were not going to increase the privatization of hospitals. Ford's comment, "You will only pay with your OHIP card," sounds like I won't touch the green belt. There is ample proof that where private hospitals operate, you do pay with your credit card. An article in The Breach questions if the only people who benefit from handing over vital services to private for-profit entities are for-profit companies. It begs the question, is that why this policy is being followed? Bill 60 will disproportionately affect small rural hospitals. Most of the surgeries in these hospitals are the so-called easier surgeries, such as colonoscopies or cataract surgery. Lower volume in a small hospital raises the question as to whether or not that hospital is needed or cost-effective. Meaford's lab service has already been cut to half days. Colonoscopies are scheduled to be done elsewhere. Staff shortages exist, but are an issue manufactured by this government's refusal to address work conditions and restrictive wage law, Bill 124. Meaford Hospital is a designated center for cataract surgery. However, will patients be directed to the new for-profit cataract hospital, which is scheduled to open in the fall in Waterloo? Perhaps our hospital will be seen as not busy enough or too costly to keep open when other large urban options exist and the government has a contract with a for-profit entity. If our hospital is rumored to close or indeed closes, will people want to move here and will doctors want to practice here? We already have a serious shortage. I admit that this is conjecture, but it is entirely feasible given the belief system of this government, which is business and profit first, care and community second. There are better solutions. Right now, ORs in all public hospitals are underfunded and therefore operate at only 1/3 to 1/2 capacity. Dr. Warner from Toronto explains that if the government funded just 50 more hospitals across the province to operate their ORs 2 more hours a day, right now most of them have to close at 4 p.m. And if they opened permanently closed ORs and funded some weekend ORs, the public system could clear the cataract backlog surgery in 15 weeks. Currently, Ford is promising 25% clearance of that backlog in a year through the private system. This is much faster, more sensible, and less costly option than spending taxpayer money to build duplicate ORs or to pay businesses that are using public infrastructure after hours and on weekends. They have been doing this at the Ottawa Riverside Hospital since February of this year. Privatization is a government choice. It is not a necessity. Directing funds to public hospitals is the answer to ending the current crisis. Rigorous studies have proven that results are poorer in private clinics. They have significantly higher death rates. Colonoscopy clinics have more missed cancers. Furthermore, if a patient has a complication during a procedure at a private hospital, they are transferred by ambulance at their cost to a public hospital, at risk to the patient and putting extra burdens on the already unfunded system. The public hospital does not have access to the patient's file, and the private business is not held accountable. No surgery is easy and without risk. Communities or a two-tier system of healthcare will become even more entrenched if we lose our public hospital services. The population will be faced with higher costs, poorer medical outcomes, longer waits, and less funding and resources. Communities, especially rural areas, have worked for 100 years or more to volunteer, fundraise, and support their local hospital. It is their hospital, not the government's, to sell for profits. Our public Medicare system is a reflection of our collective values: equity, universality, healthcare as a human right, compassion for all, and excellence in care. It should not become a business enterprise that makes money for the few while sacrificing our values, and in the process make people more vulnerable, poorer, and less healthy. So I present a resolution today, which I hope will be presented as a motion later on. Do I have time to just read it?
I think you do.
Whereas hundreds of communities across the province have spent decades building and supporting local public nonprofit hospitals and services, and whereas many communities in Northern Ontario are hundreds of kilometers apart, and whereas residents of these communities rely on their public community hospitals for surgeries and medical care, and whereas the Ontario government is planning through Bill 60 to create private for-profit hospitals and clinics throughout the province, and whereas the province through Bill 60 plans to take thousands of surgeries and diagnostic tests out of our local public hospitals and offer those services to the private for-profit hospitals and clinics, and whereas Bill 60 will draw doctors and nurses from the small community hospitals, resulting in the possible closure of those small public community hospitals, forcing residents to travel hundreds of kilometers for treatment. And now, therefore, the Council of the Municipality of Meaford recommends that the government reconsider its proposal to create for-profit hospitals and clinics and rescind Bill 60. And since I gave you a copy of this, I have added one further, therefore, that a copy of this resolution be forwarded to the Premier of Ontario and the Minister of Health and our MPP, Rick Byers. Thank you.
Thank you, Nora. It's a very comprehensive and well-documented report. Councillors, are there any questions for Nora? Deputy Mayor?
Thank you, Your Worship. Nora, I just want to begin by saying you were doing your father and grandfather proud. It would be very pleased. And no, a very, very compelling report indeed. Just one question for you, if I may. I wondered if you have had an opportunity, and I know how busy you've been with this, to have conversation with any of our local healthcare providers, any of our doctors or nurses within our own, even our Grey Bruce area, but here in Meaford. Have you had opportunity to speak with?
No, I
them
haven't,
about
other
this?
than I saw my own doctor a week or so ago and mentioned this. He hadn't heard anything about it. He did comment that the whole situation was a horrible mess. That's all.
Seeing no other questions, thank you again, Nora. And we'll move on to a deputation. And Stephanie Woodhouse is going to depute on item 8.2B, which is that Council of the Municipality of Meaford authorized the execution of an agreement with YMCA Grey Bruce based on the parameters set out in the report for the 2023 operation of the Blue Dolphin Pool. So welcome, Stephanie.
Thank you very much, Your Worship, and councillors and Deputy Mayor. Thank you for letting me have this opportunity. I would just like to say that we need the Blue Dolphin Pool to open for the summer. So it is packed, busy. It was as a season's pass holder for the last number of years. It's a busy happening place, and we definitely need it to open. So my understanding is that option 3, where the YMCA would take over, appears to be the best option. But I'm just here to say, as a constituent, that we definitely need the pool to open. It is a great place. And as a former employee, I would be so sad. So please consider this as an option, because the kids desperately need swimming lessons. Lane swim is totally packed. Every time I go, I can't, I have to share with Cheryl over here. So anyway, I'm just saying that it's a great space, and we definitely need it to continue to be open. So thank you very much for allowing me to speak to you today.
And thank you. Does anyone have any questions for Stephanie? Okay, thank you very
Thank
much,
you.
Stephanie. Are there any, I should mention, there is also an opportunity for public questions, but I think you have to register for that as well. So council inquiries. Anyone around the horseshoe? Yes, Councillor Greenfield.
Thank you, your worship. I do have two inquiries, if I may,
Let's go right
your
ahead.
worship. First of all, to our CAO, Mr. Armstrong, the AMO conference organizers are taking delegation requests from municipalities for the upcoming conference in August. I'm just wondering, we've just heard about a very crucial potential situation, our hospital. We are involved or trying to get some involvement in, shall we say, income-based housing. So I'm just wondering, would you like the council to forward some suggestions, or is staff going to come back to council with some suggestions? I think there are pertinent subjects out there.
Through the mayor, deputations are currently being reviewed. A lot of the discussion is with the mayor on whether we're partnering with other organizations because they're doing it, which has been the case in the past, or whether we need to make our own. So I would suggest you send any suggestions to the mayor, and I will review it for potential deputations at AMO. That's been our practice in the past.
Okay, thank you for that. I'm thinking there's still adequate time to get somebody forwarded. If I may, with my second question, Mayor Kender, and this one to Jessica or perhaps Victoria, it involves the Trowbridge Street Bridge, and not really so much the bridge, but the as you're coming west across the bridge to the stop sign, we have had a wide white line painted on the pavement, and it's getting pretty beat up. There's not much of that white line left there, and I have noticed that some folks are edging a bit forward, further across that white line. I think the white line did a great job, likely as good a job as the stop sign did. Any idea when we could get some new paint on that line, make it a little more obvious? It's very difficult for a medium to large size vehicle to make a left turn from Bayfield onto the bridge as it is. But if people get too far ahead, it makes it worse. Thank you.
No problem. Through you, Mr. Chair. All stop bars, including this one, are included in our municipal line painting contract. Contract is done every year in the summertime, usually to negate any sort of school, extra buses, all that kind of stuff in town. The contract itself is going to be closing. It's out now. It closes May 24th or 25th, whatever the Friday of that week is. And we'll award the tender, and the work will take place thereafter. So I would say you could see the stop bars looking spiffy probably at some point in June, maybe July, depending on when they decide to get going. But that won't be the only one. As every year, they do everything in town: parking stalls, stop bars, all that good stuff.
Thank you.
Deputy Mayor.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. And with your indulgence, I have two questions as well. The first one would be for Mr. Smith. We've seen on Facebook this week a lot of comments about food trucks, and I just wondered if you would mind sharing with council sort of the process that went along with that, how the decisions were made, where the trucks were going to be, what the financial side of that is, and any other information that you'd like to share.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Through you, Mayor Kentner. This is a pretty simple one. We've done what we do with pretty much everything, which was put out a call for bids. We accepted bids by a certain date and then awarded the bids to the person who sent the most money, who had what we call a viable bid, in that they were going to provide the right selections of food and so on, and had good opening hours. There will be food vendors at Memorial Park and at Meaford Harbour this year, and both of those were awarded to whoever gave the best bid.
Thank you very much for that. Shall I go on?
Yeah, please.
My second question was for Jessica. I happened to go for a walk the other day back in the Leaf and Yard, and I noticed there's quite a large pile of broken pavement there that I gather has been pulled from various job sites. And I'm curious to know what happens to that. Is there any potential for that to get reused? Is there any revenue opportunity, or what do we do with that pavement? Does it get disposed of?
Through your worship, I'm actually happy to take this one because that asphalt is being saved for potential capital projects. So the intention of that stockpile is that if we do have a project where that is enough to be reused in an asphalt surface, that's what we will be doing with it. But clearly we need enough for it to be viable for a project. So once we are able to identify it for a project, that's what we'll be using it for.
Councillor Bartley.
Thank you, Mayor Kentner. This is a question I've asked twice and I've kind of let it go. And it's about the amount of money we're expecting for building permits and planning permits. We're going to talk later on about our surplus, and inside the surplus on the non-budgeted year-end transfers, it caught my eye again that we had a deficit in the building department of $136,000. And it would just ease my mind if we had a report. Is it possible to get a report where staff is going to come up with the other 600,000 in extra permit monies and planning monies that would, so we're not counting our chickens before they're hatched, and would make me sleep better? Is there a chance to get a report like that?
I'm going to, Mr. Voigt, I'm sure we'll have a response to that, but just to comment that if council wants a report, that has to be done through a notice of motion, because council has to direct staff to do something. If we're just looking for information today, staff can answer as best as we can. But if you want a formal report, it must be a notice of motion.
I think that's the road I'll go then. Thank you.
Councillor Bell.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Mayor. I didn't know that my fellow councillor Bartley was going to talk a little bit about the building department. First of all, to members of staff, I did not call any one of you to give you a heads up on my forthcoming question. And so when I asked this question, if at this point senior staff cannot answer my question, I'll ask it again in the next meeting. My time just got away on me, so I'm just gonna ask it today. So what I have before myself is the monthly report of April of 2023, and I'm just picking up one line here that stood out to me, and it's on sewage systems. So when I read the report in 2022, and it says the number of systems that were built and the total value of money was 564,000, and there were 20 items, 20 sewage systems. So just divide that up, and a septic system ends up being about $28,500, and that's not far off of what my little company did not too long ago. But a number that does stand out is the 2023. Says in 2023, there's $960,000 and there's 12. That's an $80,000 septic system. And that's, Mr. Boyd, if that's yourself, like I say, if you can't answer that for the way I'm looking at the math or the way the report is done, don't answer it. I'll just ask it again in the next couple of weeks because the report's already out. So it is what it is, to say in old term. So that's just something I'm looking at when I read a report like this. And I may well need an education on how to really truly go through a report like that. So can I just leave it like that? It's, you know.
If I could interject again, please, Mr. Mayor. That report is an item on the agenda today. It is the last item in committee of the whole. So if we could deal with that then when it is on the agenda, then there is also a chance that we may be able to find out the answer between now and then.
Mr. Voigt.
Unfortunately, Matt, no, we won't be able to, only because that we'll have to go through the actual applications, the number of them, and see what it was. My first best guess is that those might have been for which we saw a lot more of last year, significantly larger homes with more bedrooms, more appliances that need water, and therefore the septic systems were larger. That's just a guess. We can get into more detail, but that will involve literally pulling up each of those, I think you said 19 files or whatever from last year, and then, you know, getting some information about that without getting into the details of who the applicants and stuff were. So
I appreciate the comment, staff. And like I say, I apologize for not calling anyone ahead of time because that would be the professional thing to do. Thank you.
Any other questions? Seeing none, we'll move on to the consent agenda then. These are motions and bylaws for decision. There is nothing on the consent agenda. Items for consideration. We'll begin with item A, and that is heritage designation bylaw. And we need a mover and seconder to put that on the floor. Moved by Councillor Forder, seconded by Councillor Bartley. All in favor? Nope, we don't have to do that. Okay. I never figured that one out. Any questions on that? I think it's pretty straightforward. Deputy Mayor?
Thank you very much, Your Worship. And I do have two questions, if I may. And I know this has been before the Heritage Committee and that you've done a lot of work on this. So two questions. First of all, I'm curious to know who pays the costs for the designation. In total, I believe it's $1,200 within the report. And secondly, I'm just a little bit confused because we talk about an appeal period. This has been in the newspaper and so on. There's been opportunity for the public to share comment. But now I believe at the end of the report, it talks about another appeal period. Do we need a second appeal period, or is that actually completed? I'm just looking for some clarification.
So through you, Mr. Mayor, the very simple answer as to who pays is we do. There is no fee for this because it is something that council can do without a request, and heritage conservation is something that we as a municipality are supposed to promote. So the general budget pays for this. In terms of the process, this is very much like a planning application. In fact, the heritage law, the provincial law, is written, I suspect, by people who wrote the Planning Act. It's very similar in that you have a period where the public is allowed to comment. Then you have the decision, which you're going to make today, and then you have an appeal period after that. So what could have happened up until today is that we could have received objections from somebody who's affected by this, because on occasions, municipalities have tried to designate properties without the property owner's consent. And so the property owner could make an objection to that. Council would then discuss that and decide whether or not to go with the objection or whether they still wanted to designate the property. And that's the stage we're at today. But then after a decision's been made, there still has to be an appeal period. I do not expect an appeal because we've had no objections.
Okay, any other questions? You ready for the vote? All in favor? That is carried. Thank you. The next item is Blue Dolphin Pool operations for 2023. And I already read the recommendation. Mover and a seconder to put that on the floor. Moved by Deputy Mayor and seconded by Councillor Greenfield. Discussion or questions? Councillor Bartley.
Thank you, Mayor Kentner. Now, since this report come out, it was announced in Owen Sound that the YMCA has received a grant to train lifeguards. And I've since found out they've received the second grant to train lifeguards. I've been in contact with them, and it doesn't say it's lifeguards for Owen Sound, it's for the area. So there is money in Owen Sound to train lifeguards for free. And I was hoping that this municipality could get on the bandwagon, get on the newspaper, get on the radio for potential people that wanted to be a lifeguard, because that's our issue. I know we've lost, I think, two Owen Sound because they've just upped the pay scale by $5 an hour for lifeguards. So that's why we've lost them 3. But I think if we were to get it out there that their training, which is several $100s, could be free, I think we might have people step up to the plate and alleviate this issue here. I was wondering if that's something we could do as a municipality, is get it out there ASAP that there's free training.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we already are starting to do that. I believe if you look on the municipality social media on Friday, there was a post about that. The added advantage of this program, and it's a great program, is that not only will lifeguards get free training, but the YMCA will employ basically anybody who does the training and would like a job at the end of it. So, you know, it's a pretty good situation to be. So yes, we're distributing the YMCA's promotional materials for this, and do hope that more people will sign up.
Thank you, Mayor Kentner. Having said that, I was wondering if we could set this aside, the decision on this one, for a week or two till we see what happens with some advertising, or does this decision have to be made now?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, this decision has to be made now. It takes a considerable amount of time and effort to prepare the pool for opening, and the pool is originally scheduled to open 2 weeks today. We won't be able to do that based on the current situation, but regardless, if we are going to move forward at all this summer, we need to start the preparation for that. The other reason is that the idea that somebody will receive training and be available to work for us this summer when we need to open the pool, it isn't real. There are multiple courses that you have to go through to become a qualified lifeguard. Plus, we wouldn't want to have a staff fully staffed of people who have literally only just taken the courses and haven't got any experience. So no, this is a decision for now. This program, which will hopefully train more lifeguards, is a great thing for the area, but it doesn't guarantee us more people, because again, if the YMCA are willing to hire them and they're going to pay them more money than we're able to pay them, then I know where I would choose to work. And it's the place with the year-round hours and higher pay.
Councillor Greenfield.
Thanks, Mayor Kentner. Through you to Mr. Smith. Okay, if we don't decide on this today, I'm looking at perhaps another at least 2 weeks before our next council meeting that it could come back. We're talking about already delaying having to delay the open of the pool for a few days. So I'm just worried if we don't make a decision today, are we running the danger of just not being able to get the programs in place at a reasonable time?
Through the mayor, council must make a decision today. We cannot make this work if council doesn't make a decision. If there is a reason why the information here isn't enough to make a decision, then please ask those questions and we can do our best to help. But nothing will change in the next 2 weeks except make it harder to run the pool this summer, if not impossible.
Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Your Worship. And I just want to start by thanking Stephanie Woodhouse for being here today and sharing her comments about the pool. And we know how important it is for families to have that training with us living so close to Georgian Bay. Matt, my question is, I understand our own pool historically and the Y offer different accreditation types. And I just wondered if you could speak to those and if they're compatible.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, they are compatible. They're basically just two different providers of swimming certifications. So there's a translation chart. So if you were taking swimmer 3 with us this year, then the YMCA will immediately be able to tell you which class that should be under their scheme. If you give me 1 second, I can probably pull up a chart. But this is people regularly move from one pool to another pool, particularly in larger locations, and people will be running different schemes. So I don't see there being any problem with that at all.
And
Go
if
ahead,
I
another
may, your
question.
worship, and can you also confirm any of our applicants? I believe we had 4. So those staff would be picked up by the Y and they would immediately have that increase in pay according to their qualifications. So those folks will have jobs.
Yeah, as part of this agreement, the YMCA have committed that they will take on any of the staff that have accepted jobs with us, providing they meet their regular checks like police checks and so on, as all of those candidates would have to meet those same checks for us. I don't imagine there's any problem. So yes, we will be passing on information to the Y for those candidates if they permit us to do so, because obviously privacy laws mean that they have to give us permission first. But we've been in touch with all of the people who've accepted jobs this year for us already.
Councillor Bartley.
Thank you, Mayor Kentner. And if there's nobody other comments, I just wanted to say, I fully believe in swimming pools. My kids, within year 1 of their birth, were in a pool, learned how to swim. Option 3 is not an option to me. Option 1 or 2 are viable. I think Meaford should have a hand in running the pool. I guess Meaford would operate the pool, but the registration be done through the Y. Is that option 2? Or option 1, YMCA doesn't come over and shock our pool and look after our pool? We still look after the pool, correct?
So with the only option that is a viable one, which is option 1, because the YMCA were not willing to make an operation under a different model, then yes, we will be responsible for the capital, we'll be responsible for the opening of the pool each day, for the chemical testing and so on. So we would have staff on site every day, but the YMCA would take on all operations when the pool is open, including taking of cash at the front desk, teaching of lessons, lifeguarding, setting the schedule, etc., etc.
Thank you. Having said that, this is going to cost us money, but I would bring forward option 1. And this would be for 1 year, Mr. Smith, and we can visit this?
Yes, absolutely. Because this is a rush, because this is something we need to do very quickly, it's only fitting that we only deal with this summer because it is an emergency. I think I mentioned in the report that this is something that we as staff think we need to look at very, very carefully because we don't want to be in this situation on May the 15th of 2024. So before we are budgeting for next year, we will be looking at what the best option is here. And the advantage there is that we'll have had at least a month or 2 of operations this year to get a feel for how it's working.
So would you like to move a motion?
You already have the motion on the table.
Okay. Oh, so the motion is to adopt option 1, correct? Okay.
Yeah.
Are there any other questions, comments? I'd just like to go on record that to thanking staff for a viable solution. This was not any problem of their making or ours. It's totally out of our control. And I think it's an excellent solution. And, it's just in the nick of time. So thank you. Ready for the vote? All in favor? And that is carried. Thank you. Next item is the council, the recommendations that council of the municipality of Meaford approve heritage permit 2023-01 for demolition and removal of the former Midas Mart located at 12 Nelson Street East, which is very confusing, but true, as per the policies defined in the Heritage Conservation District Study Plan and Guidelines, specifically section 4.9.3, demolition and removal of non-heritage buildings and conditional upon the site being filled and sodded after demolition. Can I have a mover and seconder to put that on the floor? Moved by Councillor Bartley, seconded by Councillor Forder. Questions, discussion? Go ahead, Deputy Mayor.
I thank you, Your Worship, and I don't really have a question. I just want to say that this is a tough one. This is sad. That building has been there our entire lives, and we certainly remember how well used it's been for band concerts and through the Midas Mart and so on, but I just don't see really any other solution here. We know it's not a healthy building. We know it's not going to be used for the same purposes that it has been in the past, and times have to change, but it will be a sad day when this comes down.
And if I can just add to that, I think that it's paving the way for the next thing, which is going to be the greening of the Market Square, and it becoming much more reverting actually to the important role it played in community involvement and engagement in the past. So that said, you're ready to vote? Sorry, go ahead, Councillor Greenfield.
Thank you. Sorry to get in late. I just wanted to add that this was discussed at our Heritage Committee meeting, and there were some concerns, some nostalgia, shall we say, and as there should be. But I'd like to think the Heritage Committee said, yeah, we can see the future here. So I'm hoping this is just an example that our Heritage Committee, although sometimes we are tied to the past quite closely, we do think of the future of this municipality, and we do have that under our consideration. And I think this will be one small step in the future of our downtown and hopefully the whole municipality. Thank you.
So you're ready to vote. All in favor? And that is carried. Thank you. Item D is a bylaw to appoint a municipal law enforcement officer. I need a mover and a seconder to move by Councillor Urick, seconded by Deputy Mayor Keaveney. Discussion. Questions? The vote. All in favor? Thank you. And now we're ready to move into Committee of the Whole. We need a motion to do that. Moved by Councillor Bell, seconded by Councillor Forder. And be it resolved that Council of the Municipality of Meaford hereby go into Committee of the Whole at 1:47 p.m. And the first thing we're dealing with here is the award of tender for Station 5 pump replacement. The recommendation is that the Committee of the Whole recommend Council of the Municipality of Meaford, 1, authorize the Treasurer / Director of Corporate Services to transfer $20,591.14 from the Water Reserve Fund to fund the remaining cost of the Station 5 pump replacement. And 2, approve the award of tender ES 2023-06 Station 5 pump replacement to BGL Contractors Corporation at the cost of $100,091.14, including the municipality's non-refundable allocation of HST. And authorize number 3, authorize the mayor and clerk to enter into the necessary agreement. So do we have a mover and seconder for that? Moved by Deputy Mayor Keaveney, seconded by Councillor Urick. Discussion, questions, Councillor Forder.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And through you, just looking to get a little bit of an education from staff with regards to this was there was only one tender that was responsive and meeting specifications. Just curious to know, how often is that a thing, and why would we only have had one tender? Where's everybody else? Thank you.
Through your worship, I guess depends on the project. It could sometimes be depending on the time of year when you put something out, the type of contractors already have work for the season. This is typically when stuff goes out. So potentially for this project, it could be because it's specialized work, and especially getting this type of specialization locally is more difficult. In some cases, we do happen to get more, but sometimes, unfortunately, there is a limited number of bids. In some situations, we can see maybe why there might have been something in the tender. We might have seen people were interested, but then didn't bid in particular. But I think in this specific instance, it is just that this specialized work. And unfortunately, in this case, we just received one bid. But we always look into them further to figure out how we can do it better for our future to get more bids, because obviously that is advantageous.
Yes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, just one follow-up. So geographically, what's the scope when we're looking to entertain bids from these companies? How far do we look? How far is our reach?
Through your worship. So for an item like this would go on, we put our bids on bids and tenders. It's provincial, it might be further than that, bidding platform that most municipalities use. And so essentially anyone provincially would be able to see what we are posting and show interest if it seems like something viable to them. On larger projects, we definitely get people from further away because they can make more money off them, or for certain types of work, while other stuff you get more local people because it's for smaller amounts.
Any other questions? You ready for the vote? All in favor? That is carried. Thank you. Next item is the 2022 year-end surplus. And the recommendation is that Committee of the Whole recommend Council of the Municipality of Meaford, 1, direct the treasurer to make the following non-budgeted year-end transfers. A, transfer $180,000 to the Bridge and Culvert Reserve Fund. B, transfer $16,100 to the Library Reserve Fund. C, transfer $50,000 to the Capital Intertownship Fire Department Reserve Fund. And 2, direct the treasurer to make the following transfers to be funded from the 2022 operating surplus. A, transfer $187,000 to the Capital Fleet Reserve to fund an emergency repair to a grader in 2023. B, transfer $230,000 to the Tax Rate Stabilization Reserve for the unfunded payment in lieu of taxes payment related to education rates. C, transfer $98,000 to the Working Capital Reserve to offset 2023 capital projects funded from reserves. And D, transfer the balance of the 2022 operating surplus to the Information Technology Reserve Fund to implement future software needs. Can I have a motion to put that on the floor? Councillor Bartley, seconded by Councillor Greenfield. Discussion, questions, Councillor Bartley.
Thank you, Mayor Kentner. When this first came out, I was asked by someone, how are you going to explain this to the public that we're out that much money? Well, staff has done a great job of doing that. It tells us where the money's there. A lot of it is salary gapping. You can't budget for salary gapping. Extra income, you can't budget for that. WSIB refund, you can't budget for that. And it goes on and on and on. So it's explained right there. If somebody says to you, how can you be that far out? There it is. And I beg anybody to be able to budget for that. You can't do it. And during budget deliberations, I said there'd be some money to pay for what we were taking out of reserves, and it has happened. The only question I have is if somebody could explain to me on the grader, that much money, what are we replacing the whole grader? Or that's a lot of money.
Through you, Mr. Chair. So it is our oldest grader. It's the one from 2013. It has about 10,000 hours on it. The engine failed is the easy answer to that. And we have looked at all the alternatives to, do we refurbish it? Do we look at a new one? And I was just pulling up our pricing on. So our newest unit, as example, was the difference in price went from 450,000 to 700,000 for replacement. So looking at a new unit at this point really wasn't an option. We were informed by John Deere themselves, everything that's wrong with it and what we could do to fix it. Our plan is to, at the 10-year mark now, it'll get through for 20 to 25 years without any other replacements. We're doing everything we possibly can in this repair. So it takes us to the end of its useful life. It's just unfortunate that it happened at this time.
So unless we could get some, I'm not a mechanic. Did we not put oil in the thing, or was it our fault? Did the motor give out? Because 2,000 hours to me, you
It's
said
10,000 hours.
10,000 hours,
Yep.
still doesn't seem like a lot of hours on it, but I don't know. Is there anybody else?
I'm not sure what you want me to say to that. Outside of, I'm also not a mechanic, and we had sent it to John Deere, who are the mechanics. So the information that we got back from them were essentially, here are your options. You can refurb what you have, you can get a new one, or, you know, we can look at some sort of, there's not really an in-between of that. And the other thing was, you know, all the crazy, can we rent something, all that stuff, gravel season's happening. So in the long and the short of it was, we can do the repair now and take the unit until another 15 to 20 years. And that will suffice without any major, hope on, knock on everything possible, any other major repairs. But it was cheaper than buying a new one at this stage in the game.
When you're talking John Deere, is that John Deere where? Chatsworth?
No, like
Okay. I-
their main like head is down in the London area. So wherever that location is are the ones who have been looking at it and B, giving us all the information. It's not just me.
Okay, thank you. In my mind, a new grader was 350,000. So at
That's in your
750,
dreams.
750 makes this a pretty simple.
Yes, Councillor Greenfield has an answer for you.
Thanks, your worship, and thanks, Jessica. As I understand this, we're doing a motor job. We're doing the hydraulics and we're doing the transmission on this grader. Now, it's three major components of this unit. Apparently the compression test on the motor shows it's basically running on 2 cylinders. That's how bad it is. Out of 6. That's not a very good average. $190,000, yeah, that's a huge chunk of pocket change for anybody, especially our municipality. But if we can get another 10, 11, maybe 12 years out of this grader, you figure that out, that's, you know, $18,000, $19,000 a year. That's not a bad investment. I have wondered, and I guess I know the answer to this, unless we start hard topping all of our roads, which I don't think we're going to be able to afford, we're going to have gravel roads, so we're going to need a grader. Jessica, can you look in the crystal ball 10 years ahead? Do you think will come a day when we have, maybe we can get along with one grader?
Through you, Mr. Chair. Harley, I've told you before that I don't have a crystal ball, and unless one comes to fruition, when that day comes, I'll tell you. But no, you're right. I mean, currently to say it's functioning, it's not functioning now. We don't have it running now. It needs fixed, and we're staring down the barrel of gravel season. So things are needed. We need what we have. So yes, unfortunately, poor timing, it is a lot, but in the grand scheme of things, again, to take us to the use of its end, like its useful life, is much cheaper than buying something new now. And no, I can't imagine that we want, or we will be in a place that gravel roads aren't part of our municipality. So I think as long as we have gravel to maintain, we're going to need graders to do it.
Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Worship. So Jessica, further on that line of comments. So we know then that the parts are available, that we can get this done in short order, that we're not going to be in a position of, sorry.
If I could just interject for a quick second, this is about how we're going to fund something that's already happened. The grader is, this has already happened. It was an emergency purchase that went through our purchasing bylaw that I authorized. Interesting, the questions that council's asking about how much is a new one? Does this make sense? Those are all questions that I asked of the transportation team when I approved the emergency purchase for us to go ahead and to do this. So this is really, where's the money going to come from now? Surplus, we're saying let's use it to that grader that's already happened. So I just want to provide that clarification to council. Shouldn't be really talking about whether we can get it fixed or not. So it's yes.
Okay, any other questions? Councillor Bell.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. So just on the aspect and of making a decision, Mr. Armstrong, on this. From my background, the numbers actually, they're fairly logical. If you remember when we had Councillor Vickers on, and I think very early on, he made a comment about buying a crate engine from one of his large farm tractors. And I think Paul said at the time it was like $41,000 for a big, large tractor rebuild. So doing the costings on an engine or a transmission and hydraulic pumps are well over $10,000-15,000 a hit. I think this unit's got 3 of them. So it does make sense as far as the numbers go to do it. And like you said today, Mr. Armstrong, we're just looking at where we're going to pull the money from. I guess there's no other real aspect of bringing something like this before council. Really, our policies are, it rests with the authority that we vested in yourself.
Through your worship, under our purchasing bylaw, I am authorized to make emergency purchases where there's a risk on us being able to provide the service. In this case, if we did not act right away and get the grader fixed, we wouldn't have been able to get out and grade the roads as the season was upon us. So that's the authority to which, and it's very clearly identified in the purchasing bylaw, and that's how I proceeded with the matter.
Councillor Euring.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and you'll be pleased to know I'm not going to talk about the grader. Something just in terms of where these funds are being directed as a whole. The last council meeting, we had a very interesting and actually very good example of kind of things that go on in the community that were very supportive. We all commented that it was a shame that we didn't have enough funds in there because we had requests for like $83,000 and we had 40 to spend. So my question is, we have now agreed for those community bursaries for the next 4 years. So I'm not saying, yeah, well, can we do this next year? It's not. But can I suggest that we entertain that in 4 years, that if we were to put aside $10,000 from these surpluses on a yearly basis to add to those community bursaries, we would then have $80,000 in year 4 to hopefully put more money back into community initiatives, which I think we all agreed were beneficial for everything from food insecurities to tourism to economic development to et cetera. So that's a very, very, I think, viable enterprise. And it's not a lot of money to come out of surplus to put towards that down the road. So is that something that we could entertain to try and bump up the community bursary if the council was in agreement that that was a worthwhile entity to kind of pursue down the road?
I think you could make a motion to that effect at some point. Sorry, staff out of.
Yes, in effect, the surplus report comes to council because this is your money to decide what to do with. So what's in front of you today is our, as a group's, best recommendation of how we think it's best to use that money. But if you wanted to say, no, I don't want to do X, I'd like to do Y instead, and you can get council to pass a motion to that effect, then that's what happens. And that's very much what happened last Tuesday when council passed the motion to use, I think, $20,000 of the surplus that you didn't technically have in front of you at the time to fund the additional $4,500 a year that you wanted to award to those community groups. So you could say, for instance, that you wanted to not fund the capital projects from reserves, or you did want to continue to fund those from reserves and transfer that 98,000 to a separate reserve for a different purpose, and then we would just put that aside and allocate that to a future use. But yeah, it would have to be a motion of council.
Thank you. And I think great work, Val, on this period. So, and I'm not trying to undermine what you've done. I'm just thinking that for a small amount of money, we could be doing a lot of good community work or support. And I don't know whether that doesn't feel onerous to me. I don't know how you feel about that.
Through you,
Mayor Kentner, to Councillor Yurg. Whatever you guys choose to do with this surplus is perfectly fine. I went through and found the items that I thought were important. But if you have different or more important items, that's okay too. Even the $20,000, like we do have to adjust this somewhat to allow for that $20,000 to go to that reserve.
So just before we leave, Councillor Uriga, is that something he could move a motion to this afternoon to adjust one of these numbers to put a given amount toward the future bursaries? Or he could present a notice of motion today and come back in another week. I mean, I just don't want the opportunity to slip through our fingers here if that's what he'd like to do.
So in order to do this, we would need to do a motion as part of this. It was an amendment to this motion, because obviously if you pass this motion and then come back 2 weeks later and say, but now we want to do something different, you're in effect reconsidering something you've already dealt with, which is much more complicated procedurally. So yes, right now, if we wanted to do something, we would need to have an amending motion on the floor that says which of these lines we wanted to change, or indeed just add an additional line, because you could add an additional line and then the final one which says transfer the balance, and we deliberately say transfer the balance because we won't know till the audit's done what the balance is. We can estimate, but we won't know for certain. So you could just add a line, and then that balance going to the IT reserve fund would decrease. If you wish to do something for the 2026 to 2030 term of council, I really had to add that up then. Then what I would suggest would be that motion would say that we amend this motion to allocate X amount of dollars to the wellbeing reserve for use in community bursaries in the 2026-2030 term of council. And then we just track that. But as I say, we need to know where that money's coming from out of the rest of this.
If I may, I would just say that I don't think there's any doubt that what was insufficient in our mind this year, 4 years from now, will be totally insufficient. And I think that being the case, that we should do something along those lines.
I will, on a practicalities term, just remind council that setting aside one-time funding for operating costs, and those bursaries are operating costs, is a bit of a minefield, because if you were to set aside money now to be able to, say, increase it from 40,000 to 60,000 in the 2026 to 2031, then in 2031, you would need to find not just the money to increase it at that stage by what it needs to increase by, but also to increase it by what you're increasing it by now. So you're just shifting the burden on the taxpayer later if you put money in reserves to then use it for operating funding in a few years' time.
Yeah, go ahead, Councillor Bartley.
Thank you, Mayor Kentner. Just adding to Mr. Urick's, doubling it, I don't agree with. I think we should up it sometime, but just like Matt was going to say, that's one-time funding. You're going to have to hit the tax base at some time, unless we have surpluses. You're not going to see a surplus like this very often. Having said that, we need to make a decision today where that 20 comes from that we said that's already done.
Yeah, so the motion you passed last Tuesday has already done that. So in effect, the 2022 balance going to the IT reserve has already been decreased by that 20,000. The other bit that I'll add as you talk about this is that the suggestion of moving things to the IT reserve for future software is because we must have a new financial system at some stage fairly soon, and we must have a new HR system because we don't have one and we really, really need one. And so taking the money from this to use for something else just means that when we do try and do those pieces of software, likely next year, then the taxpayer needs to fund more of that then. So it really is just moving money around at this stage.
Thank you. I did want it looked after, and I just caution Mr. Urick, I would say go halfway between your wish list, but I would support that, but in the future.
Thank you, Mr. Bartley and Mr. Mayor. So yeah, I knew this was going to be a bit of a minefield, playing with future money, and that's dangerous. I just wanted to bring it as an awareness to council that I personally feel it's woefully on an $18 million budget, that $40,000 of community give back. And yes, I appreciate fully that it's taxpayers' money or ratepayers' money, but that's
and to your point, that's not even a rounding error of 10 grand a year. So I don't think it's an onerous amount, but I'm willing to say that that's something we should entertain when it comes closer to the final year of council, of looking seriously what that amount's going to be for the following 4 years. Because to Mayor Kentner's comment, $40,000 now, I mean, $2,000 to some of these ventures is literally almost embarrassingly nothing. By 4 years down the road, that's going to even be more of practically insulting. So I would just like to put it in everybody's minds that I think that wellness initiative needs to be revisited in 4 years. We don't necessarily have to do it now.
Thank you, Mayor Kettner. And I agree with you. You were going from 40 to 80, which is $40,000 a year, not the 10 that you just said.
10 a year to get to 40.
40 total for 4 years. That's even half of what I was suggesting.
Deputy Mayor Keaveney.
Thank you very much, Your Worship, and I appreciate the conversation, and we'll look forward to further discussion at that point in time. I do want to add a further wrinkle, though. When we had our 2 full days of presentations and deliberations, I was surprised actually that we hadn't heard from our Farm Safety Association. We've always supported them in the past. And having recently attended their AGM, and Mayor Kentner was with me, and Councillor Bell, and I think everyone understands the importance of supporting farm safety, particularly in our rural area. And in the past, we have provided $500 to help this organization, particularly with their presence at the local fairs. So I would like to bring forward an amendment that we provide from the surplus money, if it's $500 a year, $2,000, however you wish to term that, to support this organization.
Councillor Bartley.
Thank you, Mayor Kentner. And Shirley, if you remember, we topped it up to $20,000, which was extra than what there was asked for, and that 500 could still fall within that. And I would suggest only if farm safety came with a letter. You know, I don't want to give somebody something that doesn't want it. I want them to come forward and say, yeah, we messed up. We didn't come forward. So there is extra money there. We did leave a little cushion.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I think really kind of echoing Councillor Bartley's comments on both fronts there is, yes, I think it is $500 a year is about what's left over in that $20,000. Having said that, I would strongly recommend that council does not award bursaries to people who didn't apply for bursaries or funding to other organizations, because we have this process for a reason. Which is to not have groups coming to council every second meeting, which some of you will remember used to be the case prior to 2014 or so, because then it gets very hard to say no to groups, and then we don't have any money for it. So, you know, the Farm Safety Association is a good example of people who've had a community bursary in the past, but didn't in the 2018 to 2022 range, because at the time they didn't apply for one then either. So it would certainly always be my recommendation that we don't give additional money if somebody hasn't sort of met our process.
As the representative on the Farm Safety Association, Councillor Bell, do you have a thought on
that? My initial thought is if council today was going to start talking about actually handing out money to the farm safety, I would declare on it and step out of the room. I can tell this council that we're having a farm safety meeting. It's not this week, it's next week. And I can certainly talk to the secretary at that point. And if it's a matter of submitting some formal paperwork, maybe energize that.
I think our clerk's point is well taken. They didn't apply. I don't understand why, because it was abundantly clear at that AGM that they need funds that they have many good initiatives, but they all take money and they haven't got very much. But so I don't understand why, you know, they did not respond to our it may be an organizational thing. Like, it may not be anybody's particular responsibility to do that on that organization. I can't say. Mr. Clerk.
I'll put my procedural hat on and say that we do have a proposed amendment on the floor, which we don't have a seconder for. Having said that, if we didn't want to do this from the surplus, if Deputy Mayor still wanted to move this forward, I would recommend not doing it as part of this report from the surplus, but doing it as a separate notice of motion, because there is that very small amount of funding left over in the community wellbeing and bursary program. I think taking $500 in here and there out of surplus reports is probably a recipe for disaster in the end.
So, Deputy Mayor.
Your worship, thank you, and I appreciate that guidance, Mr. Smith. So perhaps I'll leave it then that I'll withdraw the amendment and allow Councillor Bell to speak to the organization and perhaps provide a letter. And at that time, I will bring forward a notice of motion if the request comes for financial support.
Are we ready to vote then on the recommendation as it stands? Councillor Bell.
Mr. Mayor, I just have one question on, it's in the Parks and Trails Department where they're 97,500 and something for increased expenses for grass cutting in-house. So we had Mr. Willis here over a year ago when we ended up having to cut our own grass, and he went around and he got equipment. He had to scramble. He found equipment from 2 or 3 different places, I take it. And we've got our personnel in place to operate it. But for an extra almost 100,000, is there some background on above and beyond what we did a year ago?
Absolutely, there is. This is a bit of an accounting thing in the main. You'll remember when we came to you as a kind of similar to the pool conversation earlier today. It was a bit of an emergency last year in that we lost our grass cutting contractor at the very last minute. And when we said that, we said we would need to purchase some equipment and the costs would be higher than budgeted in 2022 because of having to buy some equipment and having to bring some additional staff on at that time, which was higher than the contract price. And the reality is that's why the contractor pulled out, was because they couldn't do it for the price that they gave us. The reason why the Parks and Trails budget looks significantly higher is partly what I'm about to say is partly shown in the line above that for cemeteries is in surplus. And the reason for that is that when we budget for the grass cutting contract, we split the total of that contract amongst several different accounts because of a grass cutting contract, 40% of it was for the cemetery, for instance. When we've done that in-house, because it was a last minute change, we haven't reallocated those monies this year. So, if you were to take 56,000 of that overage on Parks and Trails and apply it to the surplus at the cemeteries, you'd be balancing that out. You'd be left with about a 35 to 40,000 extra in the Parks and Trails. And that's the extra money it cost us because we lost the contract.
Councillor Euring.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll kind of echo the same question regarding the fleet services, because $300,000, again, just looking for a little transparency on why says fuel and maintenance, I get, but it's a heady number, so just like a little clarification.
Through you, Mayor Kentner, to Councillor Yerrick, that is when I went through and reviewed all the accounts, our fuel and our maintenance charges have gone up because of COVID, and we're still reeling from additional costs. So a lot of that had to do with fuel and maintenance, and a small portion would be the fleet enterprise as well when we did all the balancing out.
Go ahead.
So sure, the maintenance, how much of that percentage is built into the lease into the contract?
Okay, any more questions? Then are we ready to vote on this? All in favor? And that is carried. Thank you. Next, we're looking at a group of memos here, and the first is the quarterly variance report from our treasurer. Any comments? I thought it looked pretty good so far. Okay, are you ready to vote on that? All in favor? That is.
We don't need a vote on the memos.
Oh,
They're
okay,
just
sorry.
they're just
Okay,
on the
that's-
agenda for information.
Okay, council directions log. Anybody have any questions or comments on that? I'll just say one of them is 9 years old. So I think there might have been some merit to my motion a year ago that we dispense with some of these things that we're never going to do.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, all of these on here were the ones that council decided to retain after that discussion in December. The special events one, which is the one that you're referring to, I suspect will be able to come off this year. It might not be a bylaw as was stated back then, but we have a bunch of material that's being produced by the team right now to assist with event organisers.
Any okay, Deputy Mayor?
Your worship, thank you. I just thought it was important for anyone listening to mention that in relation to the short-term accommodation rentals potential bylaw, that it is listed here in council directions that we will have that project charter coming to council in June. Everybody knows that is a priority of this council, and I just wanted to keep anyone listening to our meeting aware that that is the timeline for the next step in that process.
Any other questions or comments on this? The delegated authority report. Anything on that one? And the building report for April 2023, we'd had a little discussion on it at the beginning of the meeting. Anything further? Sorry, Harley, did you have a question? Or do you, maybe you'd like to comment on the building report? I think it's a hard copy of it over here.
A bit of a slow start. A bit of a slow start compared to some of the last few years, but we are up at $12.5 million, which is impressive. 9 new homes. One that it caught my eye was the agricultural buildings of over $2 million. I think that's a really good sign. So I have talked to a few contractors. They're all saying it's been a surprisingly slow start. They have thought the cool, damp weather didn't help, and the substantially higher interest rates have not helped. So anyway, I'm hoping with the better weather here and continuing for the next 9 months, well, 7 months, the pace will pick up, and in a few months we're going to see some very impressive numbers on the building report. Thank you.
Thank you, Harley. We'll move on to updates from members appointed to County Council, committees and local boards. And I'll start with Deputy Mayor Shirley Keaveney with a report on County Council.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. County Council did meet last Thursday, May the 11th. We began with a presentation by Dr. Wayne Caldwell, Guelph University Professor of Rural Planning and Development. The new provincial planning statement, which is focused on policies that will drive the building of more homes in Ontario, suggests that 3 lots may be severed from farm parcels if agriculture is the prime use of the existing land. If any residential use would not hamper surrounding agricultural operations, and if the new lot complies, if the new lot complies with minimum distance separation formulae. Each new lot is also permitted an ADU, additional dwelling unit. Dr. Caldwell is very concerned that such severances will challenge the future of agriculture in Ontario. If you consider that there are approximately 170,000 eligible parcels in the province, and if 3 lots were severed from each at a size of 1 acre each, that would be a total of 510,000 acres of farmland taken out of possible production. Stats Canada reported that Ontario had 11,766,071 acres of farmland in 2021. Not only, sorry, I'm reading from my phone because I forgot my printed copy, so bear with me. Okay, not only will this policy lead to loss of farmland, it will impact farms in many ways, ranging from impacts on land values to trespassing issues, to road safety, to concerns over manure applications, and so on. This new lot creation policy will ultimately reduce opportunities to create and expand livestock operations in Ontario. A quote from Dr. Caldwell. On a typical concession block, the proposed new PPS will allow at least 30 new residential lots with minimum distance setbacks. There will be virtually no space for growth in the livestock sector. Indeed, we should ask the question, is this the beginning of the end for animal agriculture in Ontario? Pretty serious stuff. County staff will be submitting comments on the proposed PPS to the province by June 5th. This will be their main concern. Staff suggested that if this number of homes were added to the rural areas over urban settlement areas, 93% more land would be required. This issue was discussed this past week at both the Agricultural Advisory Committee and the Planning and Economic Development Advisory Committee at the county level, where one of the main concerns was that the province needs to recognize that a one-size-fits-all approach to planning in Ontario does not work. Natural heritage guidelines for the PPS are not yet released. The county has been considering hiring a planning ecologist to take on duties that have been removed from the Conservation Authority's responsibilities. The idea was to hire an ecologist at the county level that could take on the needs of each lower tier. This plan is now on hold until we see what the natural heritage comments are from the province. Council heard a report from Jody McEachran where he outlined the new 5-year IT strategy for the county. The Perry Group suggested 4 main themes for improvement. Improved governance, which would be creating foundational policies and processes that are repeatable and efficient, fully established business systems, basically better planning, customer service modernization. The county operates over 50 services online for residents. Monitoring and feedback on these systems will be more closely analyzed. And fourthly, engagement, more training for staff, a dedicated IT person for each department, and hopefully some additional training for council members as well. The industry average for IT staffing is 4.3% of budget. Grey County is at 1.8%. Their staff are doing great work, but council does recognize they will soon need additional supports. Staff will also be providing response to ISO's Pathways to Decarbonization study, which supports the government's goal to ensure that building blocks are in place for an integrated energy plan that meets Ontario's energy needs while maintaining reliability, affordability, and our clean energy advantage. And so over to you, Your Worship, if you wish to add anything.
I just maybe add to that. Grey County is the place where you often get the big picture. And I felt that we really did get the big picture from Dr. Caldwell, who basically said that every effort that we've made in the last 30 years, there's now a turnabout. We're going to march right back to where we were 30 years ago as far as promoting and enhancing our agriculture industry in Ontario. Pretty significant shift and not one that gives you a lot of confidence in an area like ours where we know and understand where our food comes from. So next, the Heritage Advisory Committee, and I'm going to ask Harley. I'd be biased. I was the chair of that meeting. I'll ask Harley to report on that.
Okay, thanks, Your Worship, and you're certainly more than welcome to jump in on this. Our committee did meet, and I guess one of the first things we discussed was the band show, the Midas Mart, and a good discussion about that. We reviewed 3 heritage permits for downtown. Now these pertain to projects in 2022 that did take place. One of the I think more important items was the construction activities on Nelson Street, 26 Nelson Street East, basically at the old fire hall. And I was kind of wondering maybe if Mr. Voigt might help me a little bit with that. There has been some discussion about some work being started there and then having to be shut down temporarily. So, Mr. Voigt, can you help me a little bit on that one, on just where we're at with that activity?
Through your worship, yeah, I can confirm that there was action, construction activity in the building without permits. That does have implications, not only from issues with the building code, but because of the heritage designation on the building. The only other thing I can say is that the CBO and the fire chief worked excellently in collaboration to address those issues, and the owner and the contractor involved have been informed of the notice to cease the work, and beyond that, they are moving towards compliance. So that's kind of the gist of it, but everything is being handled quite well by staff.
About the only other item, your worship, was information about the Ontario Heritage Conference, June 15th to June 17th, coming up very soon. Interestingly enough, it's in London, Ontario, at the same location that the AMO conference is going to be held at. It looks very interesting. They've got a great program. Unfortunately, for those who maybe don't walk just quite as well as they wish they could, the schedule looked a little vigorous, but no, a lot of really good things. It sounds like a great conference coming up.
Thank you, Councillor. Are there any other reports from boards or committees? Seeing none, we'll move on and move out of committee of the whole. And I think we need a motion for that. Councillor Urick and seconded by Councillor Bell. Do I have to find out if we're in favor of that? We are in favor of moving out of committee of the whole at 2:31. And next is councillor motions. And first of all, is there any notice of motion this time? Okay, I'm going to start with Councillor Bartley.
Thank you, Mayor Kentner. I intend on bringing a motion forward at next meeting to ask for a report confirming where staff see the numbers in the building and planning department come from, for both for revenue and expenses. Thank you.
Okay, and Councillor Urick.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would normally be bringing a notice of motion here, and it is related to Nora Beatty's presentation. Unfortunately, because their vote that they're trying to put forth is happening on the 26th, 27th, our next meeting would actually follow that. So I did talk to Matt about this earlier, and I would like to present a motion to waive the procedural bylaw to bring forward that motion today.
And does he need a seconder?
So we would need a seconder for that procedural motion to waive the bylaw. Then you can discuss whether or not you should waive it. And then after that, if council votes in favour, then we get to the motion that Councillor Urick's talking about.
Do we have a seconder? Councillor Greenfield. Any discussion on this? Councillor Urick?
I will say that the reason I'm bringing this up is I did attend the town hall. They did hold a town hall on this. It was very educational, and it's very much like Bill 93 and development, Bill 60 and privatization. These are of equal concerns to small rural municipalities who we've always talked about us even having a hospital is a luxury for a municipality of our size. Many don't. So the fact that they are kind of trying to stand up to Bill 60 from a public perspective was great. And I asked her at that meeting whether they were trying to engage municipalities as well to do very much what happened with Bill 93 in terms of just literally municipalities coming forward and saying that they were not in support of this bill, at least in its particular form. So that's why I kind of encouraged her to say that it might not be a bad idea to have the municipality formally say that we were not in favor of Bill 60 and the impact it would have on our own hospital and health system. So that's why I'm bringing this forward to discuss today.
Comments, questions? You ready to vote? All in favor?
Yes, so we're currently discussing whether to waive the procedural
This
bylaw
is
to
what-
allow
yes.
you to consider the motion.
Yes, are we going to waive our procedural bylaw? Okay, and yeah, unless there's any further discussion, all in favor? Thank you. So now we already have a motion to be dealt
So
with.
now you'll need to have a mover and a seconder to put the motion on the floor. And I think if as it's not published in the agenda, I know it's in the description, but perhaps Councillor Urick might like to read out the motion, just so that everybody knows exactly what it is that they're about to do. And then if you've got a seconder, then you can discuss.
I will make that motion. Need a second.
Seconded by Councillor Greenfield.
So the motion reads, whereas hundreds of communities across the province have spent decades building and supporting local, public, nonprofit hospitals and services, and whereas many communities in Northern Ontario are hundreds of kilometers apart, and whereas residents of these communities rely on their public community hospitals for surgeries and medical care, and whereas the Ontario government is planning, through Bill 60, to create private for-profit hospitals and clinics throughout the province, and whereas the province, through Bill 60, plans to take thousands of surgeries and diagnostics tests out of our local public hospitals and offer those services to the private for-profit hospitals and clinics. And whereas Bill 60 will draw doctors and nurses from the small community hospitals, resulting in the possible closure of those small public community hospitals, forcing residents to travel hundreds of kilometers for treatment. And now, therefore, the Council of the Municipality of Meaford recommends that the government reconsider its proposal to create private for-profit hospitals and clinics and rescind Bill 60. Now, I know that Nora had an extra line that was on the end of that I do not have.
I think the extra line was, and the motion be forwarded to the Premier, the MPP and the Minister of Health, which we would do as a matter of course anyway.
Thank you.
Councillor Greenfield.
Thanks, Your Worship. I just wondered if that add-on could include this going to the town of Blue Mountains, because we are their hospital. Well, just a suggestion.
I believe our clerk is doing that at the moment. Is that?
If the mover would like to add that to his motion, then yeah, we can absolutely do that. If not, it will have to be an amendment.
I agree with that.
Okay. Any further discussion at this point? Councillor Bell.
So it's very serious, very pertinent question. First of all, have we as a municipality and a council ever sent letters in opposition to the in-power government before?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, not often. We have tended over the last few years to ask the county to sort of speak on our behalf when dealing with legislation, just in essence, because, you know, the time it takes to review all the legislation that comes out is significant, and we haven't felt that there is value of that when the county tend to do it anyway. I don't know if the county have done anything on this one. We did send feedback last year to the province about some of the certification requirements for firefighters, for instance. I think we may have said something about one of the Planning Act changes that's happened over the last couple of years. We don't do it very often, but it is something we have done.
I appreciate that very much, getting that feedback. So the other thing on this is that because this is very medical and very social, for us to say, yeah, our local hospital is absolutely critical to our fabric of our society right here, and to not have a policy of upper level government affect that to its detriment. We don't want that. But to make a decision on to tell them that, is that how clear this is going to be stating it to them? Or are we just saying things for the sake of saying things on thought process, which we don't have information on the background? So if you could have that, Mr. Urick.
Thank you, Mr. Bell, and through you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, valid point. And I would say to your point, what Matt was saying, I think you also had admitted one that we sent out from municipal support was Bill 93. As a matter of fact, it was almost the majority of municipalities sent out letters of complaint or asking them to rescind or revise Bill 93 for the same reason. So it's all about small government taking on big government. So do we really feel that this will have a realistic impact with private healthcare on our backyard? Yes, I believe that's strongly worded. And I think Nora, attending that town hall, they had doctors, they had nurses from across the province. So they were offering very valid arguments as about and statistical analysis as to how this would negatively impact small municipalities. So yeah, I felt that it was a strong enough argument to put it forth to say, yeah, this was something that we should definitely mention how it could negatively impact us.
Other questions, comments? I would just maybe say that this is not the first time that our hospital has been threatened, and we all got up on our hind feet and we absolutely hung from the rafters of the old Meaford Arena. I want to say, what, 30 years or more ago, and that was the only thing that kept the hospital open at that time, because we had a premier who had decided he had a better idea. And I think that this is something that I can certainly support. I think that it's important that we, make our views known, that the to toy with something that we poured our hearts and souls and our money into for many years and all benefited from is important. But at any rate, yes, and go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to say, obviously, this is a very important conversation that you're having, but I just wanted to say that for the benefit of anybody listening at home, that there is no sort of definitive threat to the hospital right now. I think with the time you're talking about, Mayor Kentner, there was very much a, we may close the hospital. And this is more of a, it could happen because of the systemic change, but it's not directed specifically at this hospital. So I don't want anybody listening at home to panic that the hospital's going to disappear tomorrow.
I'm a little bit like Nora's grandfather. Are you ready to vote on this? Okay, all in favor? And that is carried unanimously. Thank you. I think we are, we've got one more motion here, and it's equally important and the same subject matter. So I'll turn it over to Deputy Mayor Keaveney for her motion.
Thank you, Your Worship, and I will move the next motion.
Seconder is Councillor Bell.
And thank you, Mr. Worship. And this is very pertinent timing for this motion to come forward requesting continued financial support for our Meaford Hospital, because as the motion states, our commitment has expired that the last council had put in place. So the resolution requests that the Council of the Municipality of Meaford hereby commit to donating $50,000 per year to the Meaford Hospital Foundation for this term of council from 2023 to 2026, which is the same commitment as we have supported in the past. So that is the motion on the floor.
Councillor Bell.
Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. And it wasn't very long ago, I think, when we were running for council, maybe last term, and we were at the United Church, and the conversation came up about the support for our local hospital. And at that time, I think I recall that I said that there are many, many outstanding foundations, groups, associations that have poured tens of thousands of dollars, adding up to hundreds of thousands of dollars over the past to support our local hospital. And on this one, Madam Deputy Mayor, it just goes along with previously that we believe in our local hospital and that we want to continue it. We're going to continue to pour money into it if that's what it takes. We've got the reins to do it, and I fully support you in this, Madam Deputy Mayor. and we'll be voting affirmative.
Councillor Greenfield.
Thanks, your worship, and thank you, Deputy Mayor Keaveney, for bringing this motion forward. I believe I'm correct in saying that the $50,000 a year goes back to former payments to the foundation, and I'm just wondering, in this age of inflation, should we be perhaps looking at maybe $60,000 a year? I don't like committing taxpayer dollars, but if there was ever a worthwhile cause, I think our hospital is it. So I'll just throw that out. If an amendment is required, I will make that motion. But I do want to get it on the table. I do. $50,000 doesn't buy what it did even a year ago.
Is there a seconder for that? Not Mr. Bartley. Okay, so it's on the table. Discussion. Go ahead, Councillor Bartley.
Thank you, Mayor Kettner and Harley. Well thought out. I think this is something we should discuss next year at budget deliberations. That money is slated in our budget this year. We did slate this 50 this year. If you want to go 60, I think it should be in next year's budget deliberations. I don't want to spend next year's money now until I see what happens.
Go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Bartley, for that. I'm just wondering the way it's worded. It says 23 to 26. So if we pass this at 50,000, that commits us for the term, man.
So through you, Mr. Mayor, the $50,000 commitment for the hospital foundation has ended. And so the reason why this motion is coming forward is because it has ended. And so they've asked that you make a commitment for the next period of time. I suggested to the Deputy Mayor that we do it for a term of council, because then that gives each council the opportunity to make that decision, whereas I think the previous one was for 10 years. If you were to pass this today at 50,000 and then suddenly next year wants to make it 60,000, I'm pretty sure the hospital foundation wouldn't say no, but it wouldn't commit you to then having to do 60,000 every year, because your commitment will be 50.
But that 50 is in our budget now. And so that 50 will be in our budget next year. We're not looking for new $50,000 next year.
So it will maintain it in the budget next year if you provide that direction. If it doesn't, it will come out of the budget because we don't have that commitment any longer. Yeah.
Any other discussion? So are we going to vote on the motion of to up it to 60,000? It's been moved and seconded, has it not? Okay, well, we better vote on that. All in favor? And it looks like we're going to proceed with a vote on the motion as it stands. Any other comment? So I'm going to call the vote on Shirley's motion. All in favor? And that is approved unanimously. Okay. Next item is adoption of minutes, and we have the council meetings of May 1st. And I think that's everything. We just need to vote on that. And yes, it's we don't have to. We just move it a second. We just vote on it, right?
We need to move in a seconder.
Oh, you do?
Yes.
Okay, so to put it on the floor, it's moved by Councillor Forder, seconded by Councillor Greenfield. Any discussion? All in favor? Thank you. And item 12 is communications. We have minutes from Grey County Council, from the Heritage Advisory Committee, from Wagner Hall Community Board, a report from the Municipality of Grey Highlands on multi-municipal long-term care working group, and our correspondence. Anyone wish to raise anything about any of these things? Seeing none, I think we are prepared now to adjourn. So meeting adjourned. Thank you.